This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत, झूमेगा भारत.
Good evening, everybody. A warm welcome to Storytellers Cafe, and I'm your host, Usha Venkatraman here. Good evening, India, and good evening to Singapore as well, as our guest tonight is from Singapore. And good morning, Cincinnati, Chicago, I guess Phoenix as well. So Storytellers Cafe presents storytellers from across the globe every Sunday. So tonight we have a guest all the way from Singapore. So I also want to inform you that we are back on time at 9 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 10:30 Eastern Daylight Time. So please make a note of that, my friends, and good evening, Singapore. Let me start with mindfulness. It is the basic human ability to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we are doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. What I mean is, mindfulness is innate in us. It can be cultivated through proven techniques. And one technique is storytelling. Let's hear more about it from our guest tonight, Nandini Nagpal. Nandini Nagpal uses storytelling to bring transformation in the lives of her audiences. She has also seen how stories with powerful learning outcomes can change the way children and teenagers view themselves and their world. Creating our own identity is very important, isn't it? Nandini also believes that a story well told is remembered for years on end. Nandini is a graduate diploma in applied positive psychology and has been trained in the Mindful Schools curriculum, Mindful Educator Essentials, Mindful Communications and Difficult Emotions. She is currently pursuing a master's program in counseling, I think at the Monash University in Australia, in the city of Melbourne. Nandini is a professional member of the Storytelling Association Singapore and currently serves on their executive committee. She's going to talk to us about the storytelling scene in Singapore. Nandini is also a professional member of the Federation of Asian Storytellers called FEAST. I too am a member. In addition, Nandini teaches mindfulness to children, teenagers, and adults. Nandini is a passionate storyteller who performs a broad range of stories for adults, teenagers, and children through ticketed performances at storytelling festivals and public events, as well as in schools across Singapore, integrating stories into values education or class curricula. Nandini conducts storytelling workshops and has been a workshop presenter at conferences. She also does individual story coaching sessions for adults. Nandini has been a coach and judge for university students at an international storytelling competition held in Jakarta in 2018, as well as a judge at children's storytelling, creative writing, and oratorical competitions. Nandini tells stories extensively in her mindfulness program called Just Be. Wow. That was quite a lot. And today we are going to talk about mindfulness in storytelling. And let me welcome Nandini Nagpal. Welcome to Storytellers Cafe, Nandini.
Hi, Usha, and hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here and such an honor to be here. So, thank you for inviting me.
Not at all. Our pleasure, Nandini. Storytellers Cafe of Bharat FM, basically the idea is initially to promote Indian tellers. You could be Indian by birth or by descent, from all across the world to the global Indian diaspora. Then we plan to get other storytellers also to come and be our guest tellers. So, Nandini, in Storytellers Cafe, my first question to you is, what drew you into storytelling? Can you tell our viewers about this?
Sure. Well, when I think about it as to what really drew me in, I think about my grandparents. And when I was young, when my growing years, we lived in Mumbai in a joint family. My family is still in Mumbai. And we lived with my grandparents. And my grandfather used to tell a lot of stories to me and to my sisters. And these stories, revolved around his time during partition, his childhood in Karachi and in Shikarpur, and which is in present-day Pakistan. And every time he wanted to give us a message or give me a message, he would always use a story, to impart that. And I think somewhere that's kind of stayed with me. And my grandmother, she, used to tell me stories of Krishna and Krishna's childhood and a lot about the Gita. And I still remember when I used to rush off to work, and that time I was working in the travel industry, she would, come back from her spiritual talks and, hold me down and say, wait, don't go. And, I want to hear this one thing from the Gita that I heard today. And then she would tell me this little sort of snippet from that. And then I would rush off to work. So I think these things kind of stay with you. And, and of course I grew up with, my mom got us a lot of books. And I grew up with, Akbar Birbal stories, Amar Chitra Katha, my favorites, and Enid Blyton. Those were what I basically read in my growing years. And I think when I sort of, grew up, and I kind of got reintroduced to stories in Gurgaon actually when I was living there. And I was a distributor for Aspon publication. I used to distribute books predominantly of Aspon publication. I loved the stories. I used to love the illustrations and the way those stories were told. They were the usual, folk tales and fairy tales. And somehow, somewhere, I got reintroduced to that. And then when I moved to Singapore, one day in my inbox, I found, an email which spoke about the Singapore International Storytellers Festival. And when I went and attended that, I realized that storytelling can be a career. And I never thought of, someone going up on stage and, telling a story. So that was fascinating for me. And that was when I found out about the Singapore Association of Storytellers, which is called the Storytelling Association Singapore. And I joined that. And that was in 2011, if I remember clearly. And that's it. That was the sort of initiation into it. And from that day to today, I think it's just been about, training yourself and honing your skills and practicing, putting yourself out there as much as you can. And that's basically it. And today, I am on the executive committee of the Singapore Association of Storytellers. And that's what it is. And of course, slowly down the line, became a member of Feast. And I'm also a member of two other, groups and organizations, you could call them. One is Story Lab, which is supported by the Storytellers Association of Singapore, and Story Connection Limited, which is a non-profit organization, which also has a membership locally, and that, they do the 398.2 festival here. And the scene in Singapore really is, it's growing. I think storytelling is really growing. We do have other, organizations. We have the Storytelling Center Limited, which is, run by Kamini Ramachandran, and we have the Storyteller Circle. So there are groups, and organizations which are promoting the oral tradition. So it's really growing.
Thank you, Nandini. That was really informative. And for your information, Kamini was one of our initial guests on Storytellers Cafe. Yes, because I know she has been in that field, in the field of storytelling, for quite a number of years. You know, one of the initial people who started the storytelling. You could say the Renaissance in Singapore. In the early 2000s. Nandini, coming back to you, I think you did mention that stories had an impact in your childhood, especially stories that imparted values. So, could you talk to us about that and perhaps tell us a story?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to share a story. So as I said, stories to impart values. And I think children and teenagers really need that, because what really stayed with me about that was that, if my grandparents wanted to say something to me, it was not preaching. There was no preaching. There would be a little bit about what he wanted to tell me, my grandfather, but then he would break out into a story. And I think that kind of set the message very clearly for me. So somewhere that has stayed, and I see the impact and I see the power even when I'm doing my programs and I use stories. I have seen the look on the children's face and even the look on the teenagers' face, and it is amazing to see that. So I would love to share a story. This is not from my childhood. This is something I came across. I initially first heard it from Sheila V, and I fell in love with the story. And this version that I'm going to tell is an adaptation from a version by Donna Jacobs, and she's been very kind to give me permission to adapt from her version. And this is a Brazilian folk tale. And the original story is called Paca and Beetle, but I've adapted that. Okay, so here we go. Are we all ready? Now, my story takes you deep, deep into the heart of the Amazon rainforests. Now, among all the animals that lived in the rainforest, there lived Rat. Now, Rat was beautiful. She had a soft, furry coat, and she knew that there was no other rat in the entire forest that had a coat that was as beautiful as hers. A rat was very popular. She had a lot of friends, and her friends would follow her wherever she went. Now, as beautiful and as popular as Rat was, she was also very mean. She would say hurtful things and cruel things to all the animals that were smaller than her. And when she would say those hurtful things, she would laugh her mean laugh, and all her friends would laugh with her. All of them, except the spider. Spider was a friend of Rat's, but Spider didn't quite like what Rat was doing. But, didn't want to really get involved. And so every time Rat said something cruel, Spider would just hide behind the leaf and not really want to get involved. Now Rat's favorite animal to pick on was Beetle. Little, plain, brown Beetle. And Beetle would do whatever he could to avoid Rat. But every time Rat would search him out and say things like this. Beetle! Oh, is that you? Ha! You're so plain and ugly, even a cockroach looks better than you. Oh, is that you today, Beetle? Can I make beetle juice out of you? Now, Beetle would just look at Rat and not say anything, because Beetle had been taught to ignore bullies. He had been taught that if you ignore bullies, they will go away, they will get bored. But there was no sign of Rat going away anywhere. And so Every day this went on. Rat would search out Beetle, and Beetle would not say anything. Now, one day, as usual, Rat went searching for Beetle and found Beetle. "Oh, Beetle, is that you today? How lovely to see you. I was wondering if you could run as fast as me. Look at my strong legs, how fast they could take me. And look at your scrawny legs. I would beat you any day." And as usual, Peter did not say anything. But that day, someone did. It was wise and magical and beautiful Parrot. And Parrot flew down from the tree and looked at Rat. "Rat, I've been watching you. I've been watching all that you do. You think you are the most powerful creature in this forest. So why don't we settle that once and for all? Why don't you race one of the smaller creatures? In fact, why don't you race Beetle today? And the winner of the race will get a brand new coat from me. Now, mind you, not just any coat that you find available in any of the forest shops. A coat that is customized for you. You can choose the color, the look, the style. It's up to you." Rat was so excited. Race Beetle? That would be so easy. And get a new coat. It's getting a little bit boring. And so Rat instantly agreed. But in the meanwhile, Beetle looked at Parrot as though Parrot had lost his mind. Race Rat? What is Parrot thinking? How can I race Rat? But a new coat? That's exciting. Now it's getting a little bit boring. And so with great courage, Beetle agreed. And all the animals gathered to see this moment, to witness this moment. And then Parrot gave the signal. "Ready, set, go, run to the cacao tree." And no sooner had the word "go" been said, Rat raced forward, raced as fast as her strong legs could carry her. She ran and ran and ran and ran. And at the halfway mark, she turned around to look for Beetle. There was no sign of Beetle. Beetle must have just about started the race, thought Rat. And so she turned around and she ran and ran and ran as fast as her strong legs could take her. And at the 3/4 way mark, she turned around and looked for Beetle again. Still no sign of Beetle. That coward must have dropped out of the race. And so she turned around and she ran. And she ran and ran and ran as fast as her strong legs could take her. And as soon as she was about to touch the cacao tree, she stopped and stared in horror at what lay in front of her. Right there, on the branch, was Beetle. "Beetle, what are you doing here? How did you get here? I turned around and I looked for you twice. You were not there. How did you get here? Did you cheat? I will get you." Rat was furious. Her teeth were clenched and her fist was clenched. And Beetle just looked up and said, "No, I did not cheat. I flew." "You what? You flew? I didn't know you could fly." And then Beetle showed his tiny little wings from underneath his hard shell. And at that moment, Parrot flew down and told Rat, "Rat, there's a lot you don't know about Beetle. In fact, you don't know much about any of the other creatures because you don't bother to ask. You're too busy making fun of them." And Rat's face turned red, and Rat turned around and ran and ran and ran and ran as fast as his strong legs could take her. This time she ran out of the forest, never to be seen again. And Spider saw everything and listened to what Parrot was saying, but didn't really want to get involved. And so Parrot hid again behind the leaf. And as for Beetle got a brand new coat. And Beetle chose a coat of green and gold glitter with a hint of blue. And that is what the Brazilian beetle wears, even till today. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful, Nandini. I've never heard this story. And are you talking about Donna Jacobs-Sy from Sydney, Australia?
That's right. Yes.
Wonderful. She's an amazing storyteller. I had the privilege to meet her in 2014.
Lovely.
Wonderful. I really enjoyed this story. The only story about the race I know is the racy rabbit and, of course, the slow tortoise. But this is amazing. Thank you for sharing that story with us. And I'm sure all our listeners and viewers have enjoyed this story. Nandini, my next question to you is, you use stories in your mindfulness program. And that is what we are talking today. Just Be is your mindfulness program. Could you tell us a bit about how stories relate to well-being?
Sure. Stories, there is a very strong connection between stories and well-being. Well, if we look at mindfulness, as you mentioned earlier, it is about awareness. And it is awareness in very simple words. It is awareness of your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions or your behavior, and also awareness of the environment around you. So it's inner awareness and outer awareness, and that involves things like being present, focused, and a whole lot of other qualities, non-judgment being one of them. So if we look at that, understanding of mindfulness, and then if I also look at the 5 pillars of positive psychology, that was introduced by Dr. Martin Seligman, and those are the 5 pillars which basically speak about, which is called PERMA, and it basically speaks about positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. Now, if we look at these 5 pillars and we look at, mindfulness on one side, there's a lot of integration between the two as well, which I won't get into here, keeping time in mind. But just looking at stories and how stories, connect to this, both these things. I'll speak generally about it. Well, first, if we look at the mind, research has shown that, when we tell stories, there is a connection between the teller and the listener. And this connection happens at the level of the brain. So there's something called brain-to-brain coupling, which has shown that when it's normally a communication, verbal and non-verbal communication. But when a person is speaking or telling a story, the same areas of the brain light up in the listener. So I learned this from Doug Lipman in one of his courses, and I researched it further. And it's fascinating to see how the same areas of the brain light up, and that just straight away shows us connection between the two. And that's at the cognitive level. And when we speak of, emotions, it's huge. Storytelling for emotional literacy has, storytelling has shown to be, very useful for emotional literacy, to promote emotional literacy. And one of the things that, some of the things actually that storytelling does in that space is, first, it builds an emotional connection. Because emotional literacy is all about being aware of your emotions, being aware of others' emotions, being able to express emotions, being able to listen. And these things are all related to emotional literacy. So when we are looking at stories, then we are looking at, number one, a connection with the person telling you the story, as well as connection to your own emotions, because stories bring up a range of emotions in us. And today we are so disconnected from our emotions. We have so much external stimulus that we really don't have time to, pay attention to our emotions. We just dismiss them, or we pass them off, or we suppress them. And stories bring up a whole lot of emotions. And then, of course, you could work with emotions on that. So stories is a heart-to-heart connection. It's one heart to the other heart. And that's where the emotional connection is very strong. The other thing is I want to speak about is awe and wonder. We don't speak much about it, but having a sense of awe and wonder leads directly to positive emotions. And stories bring about a sense of awe and wonder in people. And when there is awe, and I think we've lost our sense of wonder in the world. And I think it's, stories can bring that up again. So awe and wonder are the two things that, I think are very, very important for us. So that's the second thing. The third thing I want to really speak about is engagement. Engagement is again one of the pillars of positive psychology and of well-being and happiness. And we know that when people are engaged in something, it releases oxytocin. So when we know, I've seen the children in my class, they are so engaged in my sessions. The story just grips them. I've seen that look in their eyes change. So the engagement level is so high, and that is straight away connected to positive emotions and then connected to well-being. The other thing is also listening, listening skills. When we are listening and when we are in that engaged listening, that itself is being present, right? Of course, stories are taking us into a different world and a different realm, but we are engaged. We are so focused. And for a little bit of time, we forget about our worries and our anxieties and our to-do lists. And, we immerse in another space, which is the story. And that level of engagement really brings about, it's really deeply connected to well-being. And the last thing I want to speak about is reflection. Stories encourage us to reflect. And today, with our very, very, very busy world, not only adults, but children don't have the time to reflect, to pause and reflect. We don't give them that space, and I think that space is so necessary for creativity. So when we reflect on our emotions, when we reflect about the story, and we really link it somewhere that story sits with us, and we bring about that connection, I think these things are very, very crucial for well-being. And these are the things we're moving away from it, and it's time to bring it back into our lives. And we know, of course, that storytelling brings empathy when we connect to the character of the story. Children connect. We all connect, actually, to some character, and therefore we empathize with that character. So that is an important part. And stories bring hope. I think we all just need so much hope in our lives. When we see the protagonist, reaching a goal, and, overcoming all those obstacles, there is hope, and there is hope of that, yes, you can get there, and I think that is another very important part. And when it comes to the behavior and the action, there's a research actually done by, I think, Dr. Paul Zak, if I'm not mistaken, if I've got the name right. And he did this research that when he did a study that when someone listens to a story that's very emotionally impactful, they did a donation, which was of a much higher amount than they would have normally done. So the impact of the story, in taking action, right, is it's directly connected. And even if we look at in our own little lives, I think if I hear a story, let's say about an animal being hurt, for example, and I feel for animals and I'm an animal lover, or even if I'm not an animal lover, maybe I will become one. Maybe that story will sit with me, and I might do something, for animals, or maybe I will stand up sometimes to an animal abuse situation. So these kind of situations, even if the story seems very negative and there's a lot happening, which is, emotional in the story, but that emotion is what leads us to action.
Thank you. Thank you. I couldn't agree more with you, Nandini, that a story can transform lives. And I'll keep this in mind when we want to do crowdfunding, that to tell a story which impacts and makes people open their purse strings. That's full. And I would like you to end our program tonight with a story about mindfulness. You know, today, if you see in the new normal in this pandemic, though enough is being done about uplifting the mental well-being, you know, the mental wellness of people and to stay positive, is there something, a story that you could tell us and let us reflect, let all the listeners reflect, ponder in awe and wonder?
Sure, Usha, it would be an absolute pleasure. This is one of my favorite stories too. I have lots of favorites. It was hard to kind of pick up on one story to share. But this one is another favorite of mine. It's a story from Japan, and it's called The Stone Cutter. Now, a long, long time ago, there lived a stone cutter. Now, as you can guess, a stone cutter is someone who cuts stone for a living. Now, the stone cutter lived at the foot of a tall and grand mountain. And every morning, the stone cutter would wake up as the sun rose, and he would gather his tools and walk to the foot of the mountain. And there he would chip away for many hours, cutting out stone slabs, big slabs and small slabs, rectangular slabs, square slabs. And after many hours of work, he would load all those slabs into his cart and push the cart slowly all the way to the marketplace to sell those stone slabs. And that is how he would earn just enough money to eat his meals. Now, he was quite all right and quite content, and life was going on. But one day, early in the morning, in his sleep, he heard sounds that he had never heard before. And he got up and saw that the sun had already risen. And when he stepped out, he saw a whole group of men, lots and lots of men, coming towards his house. But then somewhere they stopped and they were carrying all these building materials. And they got off and it looked like they were going to build something. So the stone cutter watched and saw what was happening. And after a few days, his curiosity got the better of him. And he went up to one of those men and asked them what they were building. He learned that they were building another palace for the emperor. For if the emperor got bored in his current palace, he could come and live here and enjoy the beauty and the serenity around the mountains. So he watched for many months as this palace was being built. And one day, he saw the emperor come himself. He saw the emperor. He saw how grand the emperor looked. And he watched how the emperor lived. All his needs were taken care of. And he saw the emperor walking up and down his garden with someone holding an umbrella over his head, someone catering to all his needs. He was wearing these fine robes and silks, and he really had nothing to worry about. And the stone cutter looked at this emperor and said, he thought about his own life. And he wondered, and he said, I wish I could be the emperor, for then I would surely be happy. And so it shall be. A loud booming voice that seemed to come out of nowhere appeared. And the stone cutter looked around, but he couldn't really see anybody. That voice was the voice of the mountain spirit. The mountain spirit had heard the stone cutter's wish. And in an instant, the mountain spirit turned the stone cutter into the emperor. Now, as the emperor, the stone cutter lived a beautiful life. All his needs were taken care of. He had lavish, delicious food, beautiful robes and silks and jewelry. and everyone to take care of everything. And he felt very, very strong and powerful and very happy. And so he was enjoying life. And one day, as he was taking a stroll in his garden, he felt very hot, very, very hot. And he looked up and he saw that the sun was towering, it was right above him. And he looked at the sun and he thought, well, if the sun that is so high up in the sky can make a grand emperor like me feel so powerless and so hot and so uncomfortable, then surely the sun is more powerful than me. Oh, how I wish I could be the sun, for then I would surely be happy. And so it shall be. The voice of the mountain spirit was heard again. And in an instant, the stonecutter was turned into the sun. Now, as the sun, he felt so grand, for he could spread his light everywhere in the world, to every part of the earth. And he felt very happy and very powerful. And so he continued to spread his light and felt that there was no one better than there was nothing better than this. But one day, a dark grey cloud came up and blocked the rays of the sun. And the sun got quite annoyed. And he tried this way and that way to sneak his rays through the clouds and around the clouds, but it was of no use. And so the sun thought to himself, well, if a cloud, a mere cloud, can come and block the rays of the grand sun like me, then surely the cloud is more powerful than me. Oh, how I wish I could be the cloud, for then I would surely be happy. And so it shall be, said the voice again. And in an instant, it was turned into the cloud. Now, as the cloud, he felt very free. This was so much better than being the sun. For as the cloud, he could go wherever he pleased. He just had to follow the wind. And as the sun, he had to rise in the east every day and set in the west every day and follow the same path. And it was getting boring. But this was fun. And so, as a cloud, he enjoyed himself. He flitted and floated around. And one day, a strong wind blew the cloud all the way to the north. But the cloud didn't want to go north that day. The cloud wanted to go south. And so he looked at the wind and said, hey, what is this? I don't want to go north. I want to go south and I will go wherever I want. But the wind is not going to listen. And so the cloud thought to himself, well, if someone like the wind can push the cloud around wherever it wants, then surely the wind is more powerful than me. Oh, how I wish I could be the wind, for then I would surely be happy. And so it shall be. And in an instant, he was turned into the wind. Now, as the wind, he felt even more free. He was in total control. He had so much fun because he could decide whether he wanted to blow hard or blow gently, and he could decide if he wanted to make the trees sway or not. And as the wind, he was enjoying himself. And one day, the wind blew very hard at the mountain. And he blew and he blew and he blew, but the mountain didn't move. The mountain stayed exactly where it was. And the wind got very annoyed. And he thought to himself, well, if I can't blow this mountain, then the mountain is definitely more powerful than me. Oh, how I wish I could be the mountain, for then I would surely be happy. And so it shall be. Was that voice again. And in an instant, he was turned into the mountain. Now, as the mountain, he felt so grand, so mighty, and so powerful. He peered down at the world below and thought to himself, nothing can be more powerful than the mountain. And as the mountain, he was enjoying his life. Until one day, he felt a terrible itch at the foot of the mountain. Now, if you have ever had a mosquito bite on your foot or your toes and you're wearing shoes and socks and you can't remove them, you know how frustrating that is. And that is exactly the kind of itch that the mountain felt. And so he was very uncomfortable. And he thought to himself, what could possibly make a mighty mountain like me so uncomfortable? And when he looked down, he saw that it was a stone cutter. The stone cutter was chipping away at the foot of the mountain. And the mountain got quite annoyed and thought to himself, well, a mere stone cutter can make a mighty mountain like me feel so uncomfortable. Then surely the stone cutter is more powerful than me. Oh, how I wish I could be the stone cutter, for then I would surely be happy. And so it shall be. And for the last time, the mountain was turned into the stone cutter. And as the stone cutter, he sat back and smiled, for he knew exactly where his happiness lay. And from that day on, he never wanted to be like anyone or anything else ever again. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandini. That was a wonderful, wonderful story. I have heard versions of that story. I think it's there in every culture. You know, we have the story about the mouse finding the perfect bride, the sage's daughter. You know,
That's
so
right.
you go around finding the perfect groom, and then ultimately you settle down for the same kind. Wonderful story. I know that with that story, I think it is very, very relevant today. How would you connect it to a mindfulness? Because I'm not going to say it. I'm leaving it to you to just connect it in a simple sentence for our viewers. And why is this story so, perfect for this moment in time?
Yeah, I chose this story. It's something I've worked on quite recently, in fact, during COVID times. And, I feel that there's so much uncertainty in the world right now. We wish it to be different, right? And of course, there has been a large impact, a very, very huge impact on so many people, life-changing impact. But I think COVID has also brought perspective to many people. So, happiness being in the here and now, wherever you are. And I think that is, for me, the message of the story. And that's, I'm sure there are many messages to the story. I don't like to leave anyone with a moral of the story. But I think this is, it kind of sort of sat with me on, during COVID.
Thank you, Nandini. That kind of sums it up. So friends, listeners, viewers out there, this story, I'm sure it would have helped you in this new normal, in this pandemic. Remember to stay safe, maintain social distancing, wear your masks, and wash your hands. Very important. And in Storytellers Cafe, every Sunday, you could just lose yourself and be transported to a world. When you listen to stories and our guests, you could even transform, and that's what we aim to do. So thank you, Nandini, for being our guest tonight. It's been a pleasure to host you on Storytellers Cafe. And I would just like, before you sign off, I would just like to tell my viewers that next Sunday, we have an interesting storyteller from the other side of the world, not the East, but the West, all the way from San Francisco. So stay tuned. And Nandini, over to you. Whatever you would like to say.
Thank you so much. I think I share the same sentiments as Usha. Stay calm and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Bharat FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.
ये है भारत FM.
बजेगा भारत झूमेगा भारत.